Well, to international issues now, and the US President Barack Obama has declared the beginning of the end of the war in Afghanistan, ordering the withdrawal of 33,000 American troops by September next year.
Starting next month, we will be able to remove 10,000 of our troops from Afghanistan by the end of this year, and we will bring home a total of 33,000 troops by next summer, fully recovering the surge I announced at West Point. After this initial reduction, our troops will continue coming home at a steady pace as Afghan security forces move into the lead. Our mission will change from combat to support. By 2014, this process of transition will be complete, and the Afghan people will be responsible for their own security.
The US President said America and its allies had successfully put al-Qaeda on a path to defeat, and he also expressed hope for reconciliation and talks with the Taliban. John, what's behind this decision?
Well, that's a really crucial number, 33,000 by next summer, the middle of next year in the United States. Exactly 3,000 more than Barack Obama announced would be sent there as a part of the Afghan surge in December 2009, the West Point speech the President referred to there. So he can go to the American people next November in his presidential election and say there are now less troops in Afghanistan than when I arrived. Sure, it may only be 3,000 or 4,000, but there are still less. He's got them on a technicality. How quickly, though, I mean, that 2014 date, that says there's a transition from combat to support. Not to say that there won't still be 60,000 troops there for another 50 years. There's potentially going to be a very, very long US presence and a very, very long Australian presence. He said nothing about that today.
And the response in the US has been interesting from Republicans and Democrats. Some are saying the withdrawal's too fast, some are saying it's too slow.
Yeah, of course. And the chief Republican rival for Barack Obama, at least at this point, former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney, is very much of a mind to say, well, economics shouldn't be a consideration, even though this is a $1 trillion war that's claimed 1,500 American lives. Economics shouldn't be a consideration. It should be down to the what the generals are saying, the conditions on the ground, etc., etc. But he's also hedged. And there's a strong conservative libertarian movement that says we shouldn't be getting involved in foreign wars at all. So there is a push on in the United States to say, well, even if we should be able to afford it, we can't afford it, and others are saying, well, we shouldn't be there anyway.
And Eric, he's not listening to the generals on this. General David Petraeus said he wanted only modest withdrawals. It seems like, according to the military commanders, it's a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think the question here is what's going through Barack Obama's mind when he's withdrawing these troops? Is it domestic concerns, because he's got a huge deficit and he's trying to diminish that? Is it because they're winning the war in Afghanistan and, they can begin to withdraw troops there? Is it a mixture of the two, and what's the balance there? I think that's the question. And it sounds like, if you take your comment further, that perhaps they're not winning. They need the troops to stay there. General Petraeus, I think, Gates was also saying maybe we need to keep more troops there, and that this is in fact a political decision, to do with domestic financial problem back home.
Tim, does it smack of a political decision to you? I mean, the military commanders are saying the gains that they've had recently in Afghanistan have been quite fragile.
Well, I think there are long-term strategic considerations at play here as well. Just at a very fundamental level, you can't expect to have a war of occupation that can go on forever. Now, I think the Afghan war was a just war, but it morphed very quickly, of self-defence that is, but it morphed very quickly into a nation-building exercise. And when that happens, rightly or wrongly, I think there's a responsibility on the part of the occupying power to make sure that the country it leaves behind is in at least a stable or decent state as when it arrived. And in Afghanistan at the moment, you have a case where the Karzai government is being outgoverned still by Taliban forces and officials in many parts of the country. So I think Barack Obama has a very delicate act here to perform, which is to avoid the quagmire of remaining there for infinity.
John, if Osama bin Laden hadn't been killed, would we have seen such a large troop withdrawal?
Very possibly not. This is I guess the small-scale equivalent of let's declare victory and get out. For Barack Obama, he is treading an interesting course which some analysts are already talking about as being the Obama doctrine, the idea that the United States doesn't have to choose between the two extremes that it's veered between for the last 100 years, that of either global policeman or isolationist, that we can in fact be the builder of coalitions. We can do what we've done in Libya rather than trying to do what we did in Iraq and Afghanistan, which were coalitions, with all the greatest respect to Australia and the other contributions. These were largely symbolic. Yes, they had an important job to do, all the coalition partners, but at the end of the day, the United States had the capability and the desire to do it, and they wanted it to be, for political reasons, a coalition. They're now saying we need coalitions where the British and the French and the others are paying the bills as well. And so this is a new direction that Obama's taking. And further to Tim's comment, he's also talking about the time for nation building is in the United States now. We
when
need
you've
to
got
build our
double
nation.
digit unemployment,
Right.
it's a real problem, isn't it? Well, back at home, and the plan for withdrawal isn't quite as clear. This was the Prime Minister's response to Rob Oakeshott's question in Parliament today about the government's exit strategy for Afghanistan.
Believe that we are now in a situation where we do regularly and very publicly provide the strategic outlook for Afghanistan to the Australian people by having a parliamentary debate. That's something that we had last year. It's something that we are committed to annually, and I believe that that is the appropriate and most formal time for me as Prime Minister to update the Australian nation on the strategic outlook in Afghanistan.
Tim, is the "we'll get back to you later in the year" answer good enough?
Well, there's no doubt, I think, that any decision that the Gillard government will make is most likely going to track the American response to this. I think in fairness to Julia Gillard, what she's probably wants to do politically is to ensure as much flexibility as possible and not give a firm timetable, a definitive timetable, especially because we're not talking here about a total withdrawal of American forces. And if an Australian commitment to Afghanistan is going to be a significant, substantial one, then I think it's going to be hard to pull off unless you have 1,500 troops there in Oresgun.
John, do we have an exit strategy?
Our exit strategy is to follow the United States outdoor, but that could be many years off. Julia Gillard is already on record as saying that we could well have troops there by 2020, and there's nothing to say that that has changed as an assumption, because for broader strategic reasons, Australia remains in virtual lockstep with the United States on a foreign policy front, and will continue to do so. And while ever they want us there, and while ever our national security objectives are well suited to being there as well, then we will be there.
Eric, what are your thoughts on this one?
I mean, I just think, the Prime Minister's got to be clear about what the measure of success is here. I don't know that it's just blindly following a timetable that Barack Obama sets is the measure of success. I think it's got to go down to how well are the Afghan security forces able to look after their own country. And I know Tim's against this nation-building idea, and no one's really out there for civilising missions.
I never said that I was against the nation-building idea. I think all I've been saying is that if there is a nation-building exercise that you've entered into as an occupying force, then just war doctrine requires you, I think, to have a just withdrawal. And you can't withdraw precipitously and leave the country to fall apart.
Absolutely.
And that would be irresponsible.
And I think that's the measure of success here. As long as you've got the Afghan security forces able to look out their country. And I think that's what the Australian troops are essentially doing in their mission in Oresgun, I think. That's what the Prime Minister's got a measure of success of.